Well, welcome. Today is January 25th, 2015. I've got a few interesting bobbles with the slides today, so we're just going to wing it from the text here. All right. So in Ruth chapter 4, we get the conclusion of the book of Ruth. And so just to recap the story up to this point, obviously tragedy has struck the family of Naomi. They were in the land of Moab. And not only did her husband die, but her sons died as well. And one of her daughter-in-laws has decided to leave her, and the other, Ruth, has decided to stay with her. They've returned to Israel, specifically to Judah, around the city of Bethlehem, or village of Bethlehem, really. Ruth has been gleaning in the fields that are there, and then receives some advice from Naomi to go at night to the threshing floor where they're threshing out the barley, and to speak to Boaz. At the conclusion of last week's video, if you had looked at that one or perhaps caught the sermon, Ruth has decided to make a proposal to Boaz, and the phrase that she used was to spread the wing of your garment over me, and this is a phrase that's used in Ezekiel, meaning to propose marriage. It's actually, the imagery is God proposing the marriage to the nation of Israel. Interestingly enough, is where it comes from. So we're now the next morning, and I don't know how much sleep Boaz got the night before. I'm going to take a wild guess, maybe not much, but you might recall that he had said that there is a kinsman redeemer that is closer than he, and if he would redeem Ruth, then so be it. But if not, then he would be glad to do it. And so this is interesting as he goes the next morning. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Now, as I mentioned during the Bible reading earlier, the city gates was kind of like the local coffee shop, if you will, in the sense this is the place where the elders would gather, and they would be, hanging around there during the day if they had time. And when things would need to be decided for the village, he would call together a quorum of them, 10 or more, so that they could sit down and make a judgment for the city. And so, Kim, you and I were having a conversation yesterday. You mentioned that there was a person in charge of the village in Vietnam where you were, and the elders were there. Probably something sort of like that, I would guess. Sort of interesting, maybe some differences, but this is interesting as I was listening yesterday, I was thinking about this passage that I was going to preach on today. So he said, "Sit down there." So they sat down. So basically he's saying, we have some business to conduct. Okay. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who is coming back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech." So this is important because, as I mentioned previously, the history of the land, that's kind of uppercase TL, the land, in the land of Canaan is particularly important. Once if you go back and look at the tail end of the book of Joshua, once the people came in and took control of the country of Canaan, they were able to, or directed by God, to parcel out the land very specifically. From this location to this location shall be this tribe, and shall be subdivided among that tribe. And from this location to this location shall be this tribe. Very specific. And this shall be their inheritance forever. So this is interesting that then when land becomes available, the closest people will then purchase it to keep it in the family. Additionally, having land was a good financial investment for them, and allowed you to work more crops, provided that you could hire people or get temporary laborers to help you work it. And but in general, it was it's a good investment. Its value always increased, and it was always something that was worthwhile. So generally speaking, this is a good deal. So hey, would you like to get this? And then. Of course, the man's interested in doing it. And so he says, it says, "I will redeem it." And Boaz says, "The day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi," notice he didn't mention this till the end, "the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you will also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." So this is where I had a graphic. We had our slides got a little messed up, guys, so I don't have all my images here for today. But I had a graphic here where I was going to talk through the passing of inheritance. And so I'm just going to talk out loud about this, and hopefully you can follow it. So Elimelech is the husband. And so when he dies, his inheritance passes over to the person, his wife, Naomi. Unless, of course, she had a son, which she did. And so it goes then to each of her sons, first to the eldest and then to the younger. Well, because they're named, probably Ruth was married to the younger one, but it doesn't really matter because they both die, and so then it passes to then the inheritance for the nearest, for the wife, which is Ruth. So Elimelech's inheritance is now passed all the way to Ruth. Okay, which is interesting. Naomi is still alive and she's still there, but the historical the inheritance, the passing inheritance now is in Ruth's hands. Whatever, if Ruth has 5 sons, then it will then be passed on. So if this other redeemer marries in and marries Ruth, and then Ruth has 5 sons, he needs to split his inheritance with the 5 of them, in addition to his own sons he might already have. Okay, so this is sort of interesting, and so his reaction to this is when he goes through and says this, then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for you cannot redeem it. So the implication here is that Boaz is probably not married and probably doesn't have anybody else to split it with, and so there's no threat to Boaz's line, but there is to the other person who, again, is unnamed. Now, this is the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. This is one of those. So, just as a quick comment on this book is, when it was being written, is saying, well, back in the old days, this is the way it used to be done, which is really funny because this particular story we're reading is several thousand years old. It's 3,000 or so years old as we're reading it, and at 3,000 years old, they're saying, well, back in the old days, they used to do it this way. Why would they use a sandal? I literally don't know. This is one I've turned over a couple commentaries on, and there are a couple theories that are thrown out there, none of which I'm willing to bite on and offer to you. And so I'm just going to go with, I don't know. Now, to be honest, we have some things inside of our own traditions, if you think about them, that don't necessarily always make sense. And so this is perhaps something like that. So, nevertheless, verse 8, so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahon. So that was to the father and to both of the sons. And so all of it now comes to Boaz, including the wife, Ruth. Also, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. So again, this idea that that at the gate you would have lists of families and names and other things, and the city gate was the place where this business would be conducted. And in a way, in a sense, you'd have the information there about census and those kind of things. And so you hear that here, that his name would not be cut off from the gate. You'd have names that were written on the wall and of the various villages members, for example. So you are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. So those are some the very famous traditional Jewish women. These are ones that, if you go back and read the stories in Genesis, that with the founding of Israel and some of the things that are happening, that they had a huge impact on what was happening there and all the generations to come. So may they be like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. So at this point, he has purchased the legal basis to be able to have her inheritance, and in a sense, paid money for her as being, to be his wife. But then there also is then a ceremony that would be that to be able to then have the wedding ceremony, and that's what happens here. So he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Bear in mind, Boaz is a lot older, at least as all of our images that we have, than Ruth. She's a young woman, right? And he says he redeemed her. He bought her back. You're absolutely correct. And I've used some of those imageries there. And I think it's important to just one more time touch on this as we're leaving Ruth, that this is the imagery of Jesus Christ buying us back. And so Jesus is the kinsman redeemer in the sense that he is our relative. Jesus is our blood in the sense that he is man. and he is, purchasing and buying us back. With what? Well, he buys us back with his own blood. He pays the price with his own blood, that we are able to then be restored to God the Father. So, the Lord gave her conception; she bore a son. Verse 14. Then the woman said to Naomi, and again, this is the mother-in-law, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you to stay without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. This is interesting. So the grandmother actually is kind of involved in this, and the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." It's Ruth's child. You all get this, but it's the grandma. You know what I'm saying? So this is an interesting sort of imagery that you see here, that Naomi as the grandmother is probably going to be a hovering grandparent, if you all get the imagery here, sort of, if you all know the term hovering parents, which is probably going to be a hovering grandparent in this particular way. And it looks like Ruth doesn't fight it, so that's fine. They don't say anything about it. It's probably all good. So they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Abinadab. Abinadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. And that, of course, is the key part of this, is that really the wonder that God does in that he uses some of these people in furthering what we call salvation history. And so there's some phenomenally interesting women that are in the story. If you go back to Rahab the prostitute and her role in the book of Joshua, okay, and she becomes significant in that part. And so here you have Ruth. And what happens here, we're going to talk starting next week about Esther and how she saves her people and some of the things there. So it's really interesting. There's a number of spots here. And I would comment that Christianity, specifically in this part, Judaism, so our prehistory, if you will, as Christians, that God really has leveraged and used the story of interesting women in some phenomenal ways. And this is one of the interesting parts to me, is that the line of Jesus just has some really interesting pieces in it. This is not a story of all the generations that were led on. Every one of them was perfect and did nothing wrong. I mean, David, just as an example, is an extraordinarily complex person. He is the only one, the Bible tells us, who had a heart after God. He's the only one who was had this special relationship with him, that he is favored of God in this particular way. But he also messes up really, really bad. Okay? I mean, to talk to you before, I mean, he ends up committing adultery, and then to try to hide the adultery, he commits murder. And so there's some horrible things. But I have enough respect for him. I named my son after him. Right? So this is an interesting aspect, because it's not that he didn't mess up on David's case. It's what did he do after he messed up? How did he respond? And go read Psalm 51, and you'll get that one. Well, so here we have Ruth, and of course the various pieces here. So we are going to go ahead and drop out. Normally at this point we'd have a slide here for our takeaways. I only had one takeaway this week, and it actually was sort of similar to ones I hit before. It was kind of just a sum up of Ruth. And to paraphrase, our one takeaway for this week, it has to do that God has a plan, and that his way is better than your way. I mentioned this before a few weeks ago, but I wanted to reiterate it. God has a plan, and his way is better than your way. I encourage you to look at that, because there are things that God is working in your life that are not the way you planned it to be. It's not your plan. It's not the way you thought it would all come together. And I would encourage you to look for where it is that God wants you to join him in what you are doing. And this is a good biblical model. Sometime we might go through what's called experiencing God, which is a good study of Moses and some of the things that are going on in the Bible. But generally speaking, a good model is to watch and see where God is working in your life. Commit to join him in that work and follow his lead. This is much better than going off on your own and then afterwards asking God, hey, would you like to come along for the ride? which as Christians, and particularly as Christian folks who are trying to do things in ministry like us, it's really, really easy to do. Okay? So in your life, which by the way is your ministry, your family, your work, your things that you're doing, that's your ministry, guys. So in your ministry, I would encourage you to look where God is working and then join him in that and follow his lead. And that was basically the question of the week, which is, where does God want me to join him this week? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord Heavenly Father, I thank you that you do work in our lives. I thank you for the story of Ruth. These 4 little chapters tell this wonderful love story. And it's not just a love story of a man and a woman. It's a love story of a love of you and a love of you for your people. God, I thank you for that. I ask that you would take the story of Ruth and help grow it within us in the weeks to come. Let us learn from it even after we're gone. And I thank you for all you're doing in our lives. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.